Hi, this is Dwayne from Trifecta Wellbeing. I hope you're doing well and I hope you've had an aware week. Welcome to our Thoughtful Thursday. And it's a time to recap and to focus a little bit on the theme that we have been presenting for you this week. And the theme has been on mindfulness. What a great evening for me to be sitting here talking about this topic. I don't know if you can hear it in the background or not. And if you can, then that's going to be okay because it will just further prove what I'm trying to demonstrate through this brief conversation. But my dog, Howie, a Morkie, is snoring in the background. He is quite the noise machine. And I have to learn to tune him out at times, especially at night when I'm trying to go to sleep, as he's sleeping in his bed at the edge of the bed. This dog can literally raise the roof. Now, there's times I admit that it frustrates me, and I have to get up and move to another room. There's times I put in earplugs, and there's times that it doesn't bother me at all. And I think this demonstrates really how we go through life. We have times of attentiveness. We have times of being mindful. We have times of being grounded, times of being aware of what's going on around us, and the ability to even block it out and not let us affect us. I remember as a parent when my children were small, I admit there was times that selectively I could block out their crying. I'm sure it must have been for selfish reasons, but there's times that we're not so good at this. Now the goal is to not reach 100%. That simply would be too high, and that's a really high belief, and it's one that we probably want to attain. But mindfulness, or the practice of being mindful, is something that we all can work toward and we can strive. Each of us with varying degrees of training and practice can get there. It's a practice that I use in my therapy practice with my clients. You know, I came upon this several years ago as I was working with highly conflicted couples. These were individuals who were going through the divorce process, they were involved in family court, and I was a referral source from attorneys in the family court and working with couples who have a lot at stake, bringing them into a room, each having opposing counsel and order to come together and to solve their conflict. Now, I can tell you that listening to conflict day in and day out can be quite taxing. It gets trapped into our bodies. It can even affect our sleep. I would notice that my sleep would change. And even today, sometimes my sleep can vary depending on my client load and potentially the degree of conflict, especially if I'm not putting into practice some of what I'm going to highlight for you this evening. I can absorb this, and like a sponge, our body can absorb the stress of other people. After all, we are all just giving off energy in each other's presence. But learning to be mindful in the midst of other individuals' conflict meant that I had to practice some grounding techniques and to realize that this is not my conflict. You've invited me to be a partner in this conflict, and I had to work diligently on setting my boundaries and reminding myself what I would and would not get involved in. Needless to say, I have given up that part of my practice. I am pursuing other interests at this point, but it was a trial by fire on how to learn to be mindful. So, mindfulness is something that we all can possess as humans. But you know, it's interesting as I see people throughout the day and interact with some people or try to interact with some people, we're so distracted and we have so much that does distract us. Primarily our phones, that's one item that can get in the way of us being mindful and focused. And of course, we have to work on giving that up because it can draw us. It almost has this magnetic effect upon us. But mindfulness is not some esoteric practice that will take you years and years to master. Even if you do master it, it's not something that is reserved for gurus. It's not something for people that float just a little bit off the ground. But it's actually a simple practice that you can start practicing right now in your life. John Kabat-Zinn, who was the creator of research-based mindfulness, has this to say, and I'm going to read to you his definition, that mindfulness is awareness that arises through paying attention on purpose. Did you catch that? Paying attention on purpose. If you watch any of his videos, he will say it's paying attention as if your life depended upon it. Through paying attention on purpose in the present moment. Now pay attention to these last words. Non-judgmentally, in the service of self-understanding and wisdom. So it's paying attention on purpose. I'll give you a brief example. Years ago, my wife and I were motorcyclists, and we gave that up about probably 3 years ago. But being mindful was really one of the saving graces of being a good motorcyclist. It's paying attention to your surroundings, paying attention to the traffic, paying attention to the cars that stop and even the ones who choose not to stop. It's interesting, you have to learn to go with the flow when you ride a motorcycle. You have to learn how to lean into the curves. It's not about steering. If you do that, you're probably going to wind up wrecking. But it's learning to lean into the curves. And as I would encourage my wife, when I lean, you lean. When I don't lean, you don't lean. Because when you move around, I can certainly feel that. Of course, you can adjust for that as time goes. But being able to have that presence when you're riding helps you enjoy the riding that much more. So if you're mindful, it means that you're living presently in this moment, being aware of all of your inner and all of your outer experiences. But here's the difference. If I'm being mindful of all my inner and outer experiences, many times I will label those experiences and I will try to interpret those experiences as being either good or bad. And of course, my beliefs drive my stress responses, drive my anxiety, my internal subjective experience of the event, which can even heighten my anxiety response. Over time, it can develop into an anxiety disorder. So I have to be careful and diligent what I do with that information. We have a lot of thoughts that circulate through our mind. One of the things I like to do when I work with clients, especially in the therapy space, is to maintain silence. And some folks are really uncomfortable with that, even call it weird. I had one individual say, "This is really weird that you're being quiet," which told me he's not really comfortable with being quiet. I think there's a lot of wisdom in that space that can develop. And it was interesting just in that moment of learning about that response of silence, continued the dialogue of what we really wanted and probably needed to talk about. Sometimes we just need that space. But in that space, the client chose to call it weird, labeled it, which created uncomfortable feeling. Being mindful and being grounded, I was able to reframe that and to hand it back in a non-judgmental way, which again fostered dialogue. So when we're being non-judgmental, it means we're not assigning a label or a value to the thought that we are currently having. I don't know about you, but I have a lot of crazy random thoughts that flow through my mind on a daily basis. And I'm not required to act on any of those thoughts or any of the feelings that I'm experiencing. At best, they can be exciting things to explore. I might have a random thought about, I wonder what it would be like to watch a baboon play a trumpet when I'm at the zoo, but I probably am not going to go buy a trumpet and give it to the baboon. I don't think that would end well for either one of us. I don't have to act upon that. If anything, I can just get really curious. And sometimes as I'm curious and I'm welcoming and inviting, the thought just begins to go on its way, and you find it going down the road, and it probably really meant nothing. I want you to treat these thoughts as they come into your head, just as guests. I want you to welcome them. I want you to observe them. I want you just to let them go and be where they need to be. Now, part of this is that when you're practicing mindfulness, it's about really focusing on our breath, just breathing in and breathing out. Now, most of us breathe in a really shallow fashion. We're not accustomed to breathing deeply. That's one practice you can do. You can breathe in for 4 seconds, for example, and breathe out for 7 seconds. You can breathe in for 4 seconds, hold your breath for 4 seconds, and breathe out for 4 seconds. What you're doing when you practice that is you're exercising your vagal nerve. And maybe you have read about that. If not, I encourage you to go online. There's a lot of information about the vagal nerve and the vagus system and how it works between the sympathetic and the parasympathetic system to help calm us. So when we're breathing, it's activating that, and it's actually getting us into a calm state. So when we're practicing this mindfulness, of course, our mind is going to wander. Individuals will tell me, well, I tried to practice this, but my mind was filled with thoughts and it began to wander. And it's like, well, of course, it's working exactly as it's supposed to. But here's the other caveat. When you feel yourself wandering and your mind is going down a trail, always bring your attention back to your breath. You're bringing your attention back to your breath. You're learning to be in a calm state. And that way you're able to be an observer of what you're thinking and what you're feeling. Remember, your thoughts don't equal truth. They're just thoughts coming in and coming out. And unless you check in with another person, let's say if you're sitting across someone and having a conversation, we maybe fall for the distortion of being a mind reader. Unless you really ask that person and you trust that they're really going to give you honest feedback, we simply are just guessing at that point. It's conjecture. And we are great storytellers. Many times we tell the most negative story we can think of. We have this bent toward negativity. But what would it mean for us if we were to practice this a little bit more in our life? Well, we know that based on the research, and you're welcome to check this out online and look it up. Just don't take my word for it. But there's some amazing benefits for the body, the mind, and the soul, like stress reduction. And who could not use a little bit of stress reduction? Emotional regulation, an increase of empathy, an increase of compassion, even a decrease in some anxiety and depression symptoms. It's all really tied together, isn't it? How these answers are contained right within us. We have this container within ourselves. So what do you need to do, or more importantly, how do you need to be when you do this practice? Well, here's some ideas I just want to throw out here to get you started. Maybe you can come up with some ideas on your own. I want to say that I use this practice all the time. I use it as I'm driving down the road, getting frustrated perhaps because of the slow driver or someone who is on their phone and they're weaving over into the other lane. Someone who is not signaling when they turn. Yeah, I'm a little stickler when it comes to that stuff. So what do? I mean, I have some options. Obviously, I have some thoughts and feelings about that, but I don't want to identify with those thoughts or feelings. I breathe. I am really patient standing in lines simply because, well, I think I was in the military. That got me some practice. But on the other hand, I learned to breathe in and out and just focus on my breath. Even I do this with some highly volatile couples, for example, in marriage therapy. I just learned to breathe and be present with them. One thing I've noticed is that after a while, we will start to mirror each other's emotional state. We do have mirroring neurons that help us with that within our brain. Our self-regulation can help other people self-regulate, that other people become calmer as I become calmer. So you become almost a thermostat in the room, and that's kind of an important thing, isn't it? Especially if you're around any sort of volatility. Work first on yourself. So here's what I want to suggest. As I said, I practice this when I'm driving. Practice it when you drive. Now, here's something I want to warn you of. Do not listen to a meditation while you're driving. It's dangerous. Don't try this. And I would never, ever promote that. But you can certainly practice your breathing. Take some time when you're eating your meal to actually taste the food, savor it. Don't look at your phone, don't check emails, don't watch TV. Just be present with your food and enjoy it. Actually, it will help you with your digestion. I've had to learn this over time. I'm still not good at it. I'm a quick eater. I like to eat and get on to the next thing, but I've had to learn to simply put on the brakes a little bit more and slow down. Be mindful when you brush your teeth. I have an electric toothbrush. It lasts for exactly 2 minutes, and I am mindful. I sit down and I actually brush my teeth, and I focus on that very moment. And I also want a good checkup when I go to the dentist. So there's another reason for doing this as well. Connect with the outdoors. Um, I'm an outdoorsman. My wife, Laura, is an outdoors woman. I like to cycle. I like to hike. I like to go on walks. I like to be in nature and be present with all the smells and all the sounds. It's a good way to get back in touch with ourselves and connecting again. Even when cycling, there's a certain flow state or a zone state that one will get in when you do that, and it's such a relief almost to be in that sort of state. So just take a walk. Pay attention to the sounds around you. During this time, fall of the year, just listen as you step on the leaves or step on the sticks on the ground, and just pay attention to what is happening around you and happening inside of you. Set aside intentional time. 5 to 10 minutes a day is good enough to start with. Set a timer on your phone or on your watch for 10 minutes and be present and learn to breathe. And promise yourself you're not going to get up until those 10 minutes is over with. You've probably convinced yourself that you can't do 10 minutes. That's a belief. You can. And if you train yourself over time, you may be surprised that you may be able to do it for 20 minutes, for 30 minutes. I've heard individuals say, well, that doesn't really sound like you're doing much, until they start to try it and they realize that they get so much accomplished during that time by helping regulate their stress response and their anxiety that they're able to be a little more productive as the day goes on. So educate yourself, do research, read about the benefits of mindfulness and meditation. There's plenty of YouTube videos out there on this subject. You can educate yourself on this. Don't just take my word for it, but be your own best researcher. And lastly, and I'm preaching to myself as I'm preaching to you, put your phone away for a while. It is really okay to miss a call or miss a text unless it's a 911 and someone really needs to get a hold of you. Putting it on airplane mode is a good idea. Something I've started doing recently is that if we go out to eat, I will leave my phone in the car. I don't want to be distracted by it because there is this tendency to want to reach for it. For some reason, it's like we need this sort of dopamine hit, I suppose. But this doom scrolling that we have this tendency to do is probably just a way to check out, a way to disassociate, a way to not feel particularly what I'm feeling. Nothing's going to change probably that much on your feed anyway. Now, I'm guilty, so I'm not going to say that I've mastered this either, but it's something I am becoming more aware of and more attentive to. So thank you so much for listening this evening. I wish you an aware evening and an aware day tomorrow. And I did all of this while my dog Howie was snoring in the background. See, I was mindful. I was grounded. And I enjoyed speaking to you about this, and I hope it was beneficial to you. This is Dwayne from Trifecta Wellbeing. And drop us a comment below. Tell us how we can improve, or maybe come up with some subjects that you would like for us to talk about in the future. If you would like, you could follow us on Facebook on Trifecta Wellbeing Emotional Eating. Give us a check. Take care and see you next time.